meeting is now being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2017-18 LEA ESSA Consolidated Application for Funding webinar, information-based webinar from the Office of Cory Green, now the Associate Commissioner of the Department of Grants and Federal Fiscal Compliance at TEA. Just as another update, Cory Green is now our Associate Commissioner. He was previously our Chief Grants Administrator. His new office is the Department of Grants and Federal Fiscal Compliance, and he has 2 staff people working for him under the ESSA Special Projects team. It is Anita Villarreal, whom you've probably known for Title I, and all things NCLB for quite some time, and myself, Susan Patterson. So today we're going to talk briefly about the state and local agency responsibilities under ESSA, and we're going to talk briefly about the 2017-18 ESSA LEA Consolidated Applications for Funding, particularly about Schedule PS 3001, the Needs Assessment, Priorities, and Program Outcomes, and also about Schedule PS 3099 for Private School Services. I anticipate that the webinar should last about 45 minutes and provide you 15 minutes for questions afterwards. So as you know, our life has changed. Life is in the LEAs, life in the schools, life for ESCs has changed based on ESSA. There are new roles for state and local agencies now that did not exist under NCLB. Under NCLB, we all operated in a top-down, one-size-fits-all system with strong federal controls. The federal government established academic achievement standards for all schools, all school districts. Annual yearly progress measures were established by the federal government. And when we were responding in our consolidated NCLB application, we were actually responding to those progress measures. And finally, for schools that did not meet progress measures, there was a 5-stage mandated school improvement set of interventions required by the federal government that included such things as choice, supplemental education services, school restructuring, school closure, and those activities. ESSA, on the other hand, provides much more increased flexibility, increased authority for state and local agencies. But with that increase in flexibility and increase in authority, responsibilities for state and local agencies also increased. So this graphic gives you a quick summary of new roles for state and local agencies under EDGAR and ESSA. And there's a similarity across all of the statutes and the rules. EDGAR provided increased flexibility for states and local agencies. It increased the monitoring responsibility of states. It increased or moved LEAs to have strong financial management systems. EDGAR increased the oversight responsibilities of TEA, and it also moved LEAs to have strong internal controls, a strong system of internal controls to manage your money. Under ESSA, states and local agencies, again, are getting increased flexibility in how they are designing their programs, how they're using their federal funds to improve student outcomes. There's an increased responsibility for performance management for TEA and an increased responsibility for oversight. LEAs have an increased responsibility to provide guidance and technical assistance to schools. And they also have an increased responsibility for monitoring performance. There's a EDGAR citation listed right at the bottom of the ESSA table, and it is 2 CFR 200, 327, and 328. And this is to give you an idea that much of the work that we're doing over the course of the next year is really about pulling together the financial responsibilities from monitoring, which is in 327, and the performance measuring responsibilities, which is in the 328 together, to follow that direction of putting your financial monitoring and your performance monitoring all in one place. Of note or of importance that EDGAR and ESSA essentially codified best practices that many of us were already doing. So for some of us, this should be second nature. These are the activities that you have been doing for quite some time. So again, on the new roles for state and local agencies, I want to point your attention to this red circled section under the LEA table, this guidance and technical assistance for improvement planning. Much of the work of TEA, of ESCs, of organizations throughout the state, and even LEAs is really focused around how we can increase local agencies' capacity to offer guidance and tech support for schools in and around that idea of improvement planning. So a lot of our work in the year coming forward is about helping that improvement planning structure roll out. So ESSA has several changes that further support coordinated use of funds. This is not a new responsibility. We've known under NCLB and before that integrated approaches to federal programs and federal spending was always required. It's just a renewed emphasis again on effective coordination of funds. Some changes have made that more feasible. First and foremost, you'll see throughout the ESSA statutes, there are significant references to well-rounded educational opportunities, not just limited to the core academic content that we saw under NCLB. To further advance, to further promote well-rounded educational opportunities, there is the Title IV Part A, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants, which you've probably been hearing termed the Title IV Block Grant. Title IV Block Grants are formula grants that we've distributed to LEAs throughout the state. The minimum allocation is $10,000, and the allocations are relatively small. But that grant does allow you to make some decisions, have some opportunities to look at developing well-rounded educational opportunities, at investing in educational technology, and investing in other student supports. The second change that's going to better facilitate comprehensive use of funds, comprehensive planning, is the methodology under Title I Part A, and specifically under Title I Part A, not the other entitlements, where there is no longer a specific cost test for proving supplement, not supplant compliance. LEAs are responsible for developing a methodology to show that the district has complied with the rules of supplement, not supplant. And that's going to be a challenge to define that methodology, but it's definitely a flexibility for LEAs. Finally, another flexibility that LEAs are going to have under ESSA that can help figure out where they want to put their money and how to spend it. There's a flexibility in ranking and serving your campuses by percentage of low income. You are now allowed to prioritize serving high schools in which 50% or more of those students are low income. This means that as you're going through your ranking and serving process and you've ranked down to 75, and historically you keep looking down your list and there's a high school that is at 59% low income, it is possible for you to take that high school that is at 59% low income, pick him up and move him above the red line into that category of schools being served, ahead of elementary schools and middle schools that may be serving higher percentages of low-income students. So again, it's just a flexibility, but it is a strategy for thinking about how to address the cost associated with serving students in high school, the cost of programs at the high school level. So we have been hearing throughout the trainings, throughout talking about ESSA, we've been hearing this phrase about the 2017-18 required local agency plan. We've always had a required local agency plan. We had a required local plan under NCLB. It was your NCLB application in e-grants, and your ESSA application in e-grants serves as your required local plan. So the e-grants application is designed with a significant amount of embedded guidance to help LEAs make sure that they are hitting all of the required components, that they are tracking in the right direction, that their plan is doing everything it needs to do so we can move through the funding process quickly. It provides you a significant amount of embedded guidance for improvement planning. There's an effort to help you align state and local plans. There's embedded guidance for coordinated use of funds, for focusing on student-focused outcomes. And also there's some embedded guidance here for performance monitoring. We're going to go over the two schedules that are most focused on improvement planning processes, aligning state and local plans, student outcome-focused measures, and coordinated use of funds. So the two new schedules that we're going to talk about specifically today are the PS 3001, the Needs Assessment, Priority, and Program Outcomes. The second one we're going to talk about, but only briefly, will be the PS 3099, the Private School Services. So PS 3001 is designed in a way, structured in a way that it is process-driven. And there is a best practice in improvement planning process that underlies PS 3001. This is designed to be a strategy for those LEAs that have not conducted a comprehensive needs assessment and improvement planning process recently, or are looking to develop a more robust improvement planning protocol. If your LEA has a comprehensive needs assessment and improvement planning format that you are using, and that it meets all the requirements of the Title I plan, it meets all the requirements that your district is held accountable to, please move forward with that. There is no required one packaged improvement planning process that you have to select. And if you have one that's already working, go forth and do great things with it. This is the list of improvement processes that are in the 3001 that I'm going to go over right now. So essentially, LEAs or ESCs are inventorying whatever LEA school resources for planning you have, what plans you have, who's in charge of monitoring those plans, who sits on your planning teams, what kind of information do you give that planning teams. After you've figured out what you're already doing, you're convening planning teams that adequately represent all the stakeholders at your school or all the stakeholders at your district. You're providing your teams training, material, and time for team preparation. You're helping them, or you are, collecting and analyzing student outcome data. You're drafting problem statements and identifying root causes. Drafting problem statements is when you look at the data and you see very clearly, oh, I have this achievement gap that exists on my campus, or I have this difference in attendance rates between my different student groups. That's a problem. Now, why do I have that problem? Why is this going on at my school? And those whys are really the root cause analysis piece. So after you've identified problems, you've drafted root causes, or you've thought about the whys behind them, you're actually ready to go into completing a comprehensive needs assessment. This may be where you add qualitative information to your quantitative student data. It may be where you further prioritize your problems, because the number of things that you want to do for your children throughout the school year may not be, you may not have the resources to do them all. Because I know when I'm a teacher or I'm working at the LEAs, I want to do everything for my students, but I don't always have the resources to do them all. So you may be prioritizing your problems. You may be adding more data to it to further understand your problems. And that's going to happen in the comprehensive needs assessment. Then after that, schools are, with the help of LEAs, with the help of ESCs, they are researching effective strategies with the greatest potential to improve student outcomes. Schools are listing, identifying all the activities that they've got to complete to implement that strategy. They're identifying a specific person, giving roles and assignments to people on campus to make sure strategies get completed. They are estimating a timeline for when they're getting their activities done. They're drafting SMART performance measures and SMART goals. And we're going to talk a little bit about SMART goals and SMART measures a little bit later on in this presentation. And this may be a little bit different, number 12, but they're actually thinking about, or what we're hoping they're going to start thinking about, is identifying all of the available money across state, local, and federal pots of money that can fund each of these strategies. That's thinking about, yes, your ESSA money, but it's also thinking about state comp ed in association with Title I. It's thinking about bilingual in association with Title III. How are we using all of our money effectively, not duplicating services, but getting the most bang for our buck for our kids? And that's a critical strategy that we're going to be working on throughout the year. Schools are documenting this work, adding this work up, inserting this work into a continuous improvement plan, into their CIPs. And they did this also under NCLB. Also under NCLB, LEAs more than likely are compiling, summarizing, figuring out, developing how to transition the work of schools, the needs of schools, the needs of the districts into the consolidated application. That happened under NCLB. Under ESSA, that work happens in Schedule PS 3001. Schools and LEAs and ESCs are developing a process for regularly monitoring the progress of their students and how effective their strategies are throughout the year. And at the end of the year, they're annually evaluating what they were doing, evaluating the strategies that they implemented, and seeing if they moved the needle for student outcomes. If they didn't, then the plan has to be revised to figure out what we're going to do to improve student outcomes. So moving back quickly into the consolidated application, PS 3001, Needs Assessment, Priorities, and Program Outcomes. It organizes your needs, the LEA needs, by the TEA strategic priorities. There are 5 sections or parts to PS 3001, one for each of the TEA strategic priorities, and then Part 5 for other locally identified needs. Here on the screen, you'll see I've got a screenshot of Part 1. Part 1 is recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and principals. That is the first Commissioner strategic priority. And LEAs are inserting the needs they have that they identified in their needs assessment in the application. And you can add additional lines as needed to insert your LEA needs into 3001. If you haven't been to one of the commissioner's presentations throughout the state, or if you haven't seen the 4 strategic priorities, I'm going to give you those pretty quickly as an overview so you can see what they are. The first one is recruiting, supporting, retaining teachers and principals. The second one is building a foundation in reading and math. The third one, connecting high school to career and college. And the fourth one, improving low-performing schools. These 4 strategic priorities are going to be the titles of the first 4 sections in your 3001. So it's not necessary that you have a need under the strategic priority, under each strategic priority, but it is necessary that you respond to each section in the 3001 schedule. So if you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's a button that you can click and it says no needs identified. So it says required to respond in the gray line. However, if you don't have a need, your response is click no need identified. If you do not have a need in parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, you are required to complete part 5, which is locally identified needs, other locally identified needs. In thinking about most districts, it seems highly likely that districts will have some need within those domains of recruiting, supporting, retaining teachers and principals, building foundations in reading and math, connecting high school to career and college, improving low-performing schools. If you got lucky you don't have any needs in those areas, then you're moving on to Part 5. So I put this slide in specifically for the LEAs that already have a strong needs assessment process, already have a strong continuous improvement planning process, to show you that for those organizations that already have a needs assessment process, it may be as simple as printing out a piece of paper, labeling the 4 commissioner strategic priorities plus the other 5 local on a piece of paper, and then just resorting all the needs that you found as part of your regular needs assessment process according to the strategic priorities. So if you have a effective needs assessment protocol, you don't need to start from scratch. You may just need to reorganize the needs you find according to the strategic priorities when you're done. As we know, schools are researching effective strategies for locally identified needs. They are inserting those strategies into their CIPs. They are really developing more of an activity-based implementation plan for what they need to do. The volume of that information won't make it into your 3001. LEAs are, of course, providing technical assistance and guidance to schools about best practices, about strategies for those identified needs. And they're also compiling summary-level information on those programs and activities in 3001. So this is another section, screenshot of Part 1 of the PS 3001, where it says, you're inserting your program activity in the column where you have a checkbox number 1. Essentially, you're going to insert programs and activities here, add lines as needed to document all of the programs and activities that you're going to be implementing. As you're moving over to the left in the second column, it says, TEA, tell us, is this a new initiative or not? If it was funded under NCLB and you're just continuing to do it, it is not a new initiative. New initiative has to be brand spanking new, never done it before. On the far right-hand column under amount budgeted, you insert the amount that you're going to budget for each of the activities, and then in the gray cell, eGrants will auto-calculate that total for you. So within each of the strategic priority sections, you'll have an auto-sum amount of the amount of ESSA money that you're using to support that strategic priority. So over and above the embedded guidance within the consolidated application, there's also a series of published guidance, externally published guidance, available for schools as you're starting your ESSA planning. There are the program guidelines and application guidelines, the program-specific provisions and assurances that have always been on the grant opportunity page and will continue to be there. They're available for you now. And above that, TEA is publishing additional information on recommended uses of funds, on best practices, on allowable activities and allowable expenditures by grant program. One of those new publications is going to be the TEA's strategic priority guides. There's one strategic priority guide per strategic priority. They're organized by the strategic priority. They provide summarized information for all of the allowable activities for all of the grant programs in your ESSA consolidated application. They provide you a list of recommended uses of funds, recommended initiatives. And these are initiatives that TEA staff have researched and identified as having significant impact on student outcomes. These are ones that that the research shows will move the needle and will improve student outcomes. Following that, agency staff have provided summarized lists of best practices aligned to the strategic priority. On the strategic priority guide, the document here, again, it's supported by current research. TEA staff has done the research and the vetting for you. The recommended use links the recommended initiatives or the recommended uses are linked to resource pages. And the resource pages provide you additional information about that program, about that recommended use. It gives you more information on outcomes. It gives you a project description. It gives you places to go to for additional resources, and it provides you the contact name of the TEA staff person you should get in touch with if you have any questions. Okay. So back to, again, moving back into the consolidated application. Once you've decided, once the LEA or school or collection of LEAs have decided what programs and activities you're going to implement, you have to insert the amount of ESSA funds budgeted for each priority in these sections. So for Part 1, on recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and principals, you may have money budgeted in Title II Part A for those types of activities, but you may also have money budgeted in Title I Part A for teacher professional development or for school-wide behavioral support systems, which you want to think broadly about as a strategy that recruits, supports, and retains your teachers. All of that information and the budgeted amounts are inserted in PS 3001. These amounts are budgeted amounts. PS 3001 is a planning document. It is not designed to connect on a one-to-one basis with your budget schedules in the consolidated application. You will not be expected to amend the schedule if your planning amounts that you put here have changed. This is designed for the start of continuous improvement planning. And there will be some review of it, there will be some discussion of it, and evaluation of it at the end of the year, but you're not going to be amending and changing your grant all the time based on changes in money aligned in 3001. So again here, this is just another pull-out slide I wanted to show you real quick, is that LEAs are not required to list significantly, heavily detailed intervention programs, strategies, activities in the 3001. This is an example of how our interventions, our strategies, our programs tend to fall in certain types, and I've organized those by types. The one that I think of most commonly is tutoring. We do tutoring before school, after school. We do homework camp tutoring at lunchtime or in study hall. We do small group tutoring in a ratio of 6-to-1. We do one-to-one tutoring. We do push-in tutoring. We do pull-out tutoring interventions. We do star camps. We do summer bridge. We do a whole bunch of things that fall within the category of tutoring to increase the instructional minutes of our students, to ensure that they're going to meet challenging state academic standards. But it's all tutoring. You don't have to differentiate the multiple types of tutoring that you're doing in that list of programs and activities. So the other thing, and if there is a place on the consolidated application that I really want you to focus on and pay attention to, it is these few boxes that are in each one of the sections. So sections, parts 1 through 5 have this section of the table in them, and I really want you to pay attention because this is, if there's one place to focus on, this is it. For each of the strategies, programs or activities that you're going to implement, you're going to identify the ESSA program that you're funding it from, and you're going to develop a performance measure, a SMART goal performance measure. And the formula for that is essentially the percentage of what students know or can do will increase from X% to Y% by Z date. This third column performance measure here is a one-year performance measure. So it gets even more specific. The percentage of what students know or can do will increase from X% to Y% by Z date, and Z date is 1 year. So when I say student outcome focused goal, that's that part about what students know or can do. And the intent is that we're really going to look at our student outcome focused goals. Moving to the right on the table, you'll insert your baseline data, your control group, where your students are at today. And this goal section, the next column, becomes your long-term 3 to 5 year goal. And the formula for that, a SMART goal, the percentage of what students know or can do will increase from X% to Y% by Z date, and that Z date is within 3 to 5 years. On the very far right, your data source, use the most reliable static data source you can. Here you'll see that I've inserted the 2016-2018 STAR data. That's designed to incorporate, to accommodate my long-term goal. On the performance measure, the most important thing to remember here, in the third column, on your performance measure, make it realistic and attainable. This is the measure that will be looked at at the end of 1 year to see if LEAs are making progress in student outcomes. Have your student outcomes improved? Generally speaking, you should have 3 to 5 student outcome focused goals listed in your PS 3001. So what that means is that if you have 3 to 5 student outcome focused goals in your PS 3001, you may likely not be addressing at least one of those strategic priorities. The rationale for 3 to 5 goals is based on what we know in performance management, what we know research says in organizational management. The research shows, and has shown for a very long time, that an organization that has 3 goals for the year will likely hit 1 or 2. An organization that has 5 goals will, if they're lucky, hit 1, and an organization that has 10 goals will hit none. There's some spreading out of resources, scattershot of resources, time and energy and effort, which takes away attention from those 3 to 5 things that if you really focused on and you really addressed and targeted all your resources and energy to, you can make a dent. You can make a big change. And really the sweet spot is about 3 goals. So this is a big change in how we think about needs assessments. This is a big change on how we think about monitoring. But the PS 3001 will be your big 3 to 5 goals, those things that you want to focus on and change over the course of 1 year and move forward. Here's a little bit more information on developing a SMART goal. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, results-focused, and time-bound. And here's the formula again. The percentage of what students know or can do will increase from X% to Y% by Z date, or the number of what students know or can do will increase from X number to Y number by Z date. Just remember, SMART goals, you're always comparing apples to apples. So try to stick to percentages and numbers to numbers, and that's a useful tip. So I'm going to give you just a few blurbs about the changes in Equitable Services calculation under ESSA. That under NCLB, private school students must also get an equitable share of district-wide instruction, parental involvement, and professional development set-asides. Under ESSA, the new rule is that the private school set-aside must be calculated before any allowable expenditures and transfers by the LEA are made. That means district-wide instruction, parental involvement, professional development are included in that calculation. More information will be coming to you both at ASET, at the ESSA cluster trainings, and at the full application trainings that are starting in April regarding this new calculation for Equitable Services. I can say that in PS 3099, the formula, the Excel worksheet that LEAs used to do for calculating private nonprofit share of services has actually been embedded in the 3099, which means that all LEAs, all calculations for Equitable Services will be the same. It's the same formula and the same protocol. And all of the sections of the Consolidated Application where you had to recently in NCLB respond to questions about private school services, all of that information has been merged into this one schedule. So you have one place where you address all private school services, and that's in 3099. So in the previous webinar that we held on March 3rd, there were some audio and technical difficulties related to Q&A session and public chat. Public chat, those questions had to be typed in. We are typing up those questions, typing up answers, and they will be added to this webinar as an additional resource for all those individuals who participated. This is the first of a series of webinars. The next webinar is after schools get back from spring break, sometime around the 23rd of March. There was additional information sent to administrators, districts across the state via to the administrator address letter that went out Friday, March 3rd, and you should have that information about the webinars and ESC cluster site training and registration available to you now. It was a joy speaking to you today, and we look forward to seeing you out at the ESC trainings. Thank you.